Good to see you guys all again, and there's a clicker, here it is. So we'll talk a little bit about social media and interactive marketing. So this is things like newsletters and such. We'll talk a little bit about that, because you go to a great conference like this and you get all these great pearls and tips and tricks, such as to put together the perfect lip. But it's all about getting the word out to your patients and making them a little bit happier, and ways to do that certainly are social media and interactive marketing. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So one of the jobs I recently took on, which is pretty much the coolest job in the world, is you may have seen me yesterday pulling my best Mr. Mom impersonation with our little daughter, Undine. So I recently signed on for pretty much the coolest job in the world, which is being her dad. So as a first-time dad, there was a couple of things that I didn't know. So one of my things that I learned recently, I was asked to give a talk up in Canada. And in going up to Canada, even though it's just 40 kilometers over the border in Vancouver, one of the things that I didn't know is that even an infant like Undine needs a passport. So I was kind of scrambling to get this together. So we actually had to, I never had seen one of these before, but here's a 4-month-old at the time and her passport. But the reason I tell this story, the reason I put up this photo is, number one, people love looking at pictures of cute little babies. But it does this thing such as it's a personal connection. It's a personal connection between myself and you as an audience. And this is this thing that we want to talk about through social and interactive marketing. You need to add a little bit of personality. It's not just about the clinical and the scientific benefits and everything that you deliver as a clinician to your patients, but it's about being person. It's about being human. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And just to talk a little bit about the pervasiveness of social media and interactive media throughout our society today. By a show of hands, how many of you consult any of these sites when you're checking out a vacation spot or a new product? You're checking out, of course, I mean, this is what we all do. And the concept here is this idea of social proof. If the masses say that this is the place to go or this is the product to buy, then this is what you're more likely to buy. The yellow pages are dead. I know when I get them, they go right into my recycling bin. I mean, this is just something that you just don't use anymore. I mean, you're referring to your mobile devices. The point here is that decision-making has changed forever. The way in which all of the consumers out there make decisions about where they come to you or the location down the street, it's all changed forever. It's all based on this idea, this concept of social proof. So the executive summary of this talk about really being effective on social media and interactive media is just focus on measurable, revenue-generating promotional activities. Don't focus on the things that don't matter. In fact, ignore what doesn't matter. We wrote a book on this called No BS ROI on social and interactive media marketing. Happy to give you guys an e-copy of that if you want to send me an email. I'll give you the address later. But just ignore things like likes and followers. That doesn't add value to your business, and no one really gets any value out of that. That's really just ego-driven stuff. But by show of hands, how many of you, your practice has a Facebook page? Vast majority of you. And the question I'd ask all of you, how are you measuring ROI, return on investment? Most of you aren't. We know that. I mean, that's something that we've seen over time. You're measuring it by likes, number of comments, or number of followers, number of retweets. I mean, these things don't necessarily matter in terms of driving your business, but it makes you feel good. I mean, that we know. Again, if you'd like to get a copy of this book, I can have them send you an e-copy. Just there's my email up top, and we'll send that along to you. But social media literally is changing the world. And if you're not measuring ROI in social media, this is something you need to think about. From the Arab Spring to the Occupy movements of last year to even some recent uprisings in Brazil, these things were all fueled by social media, Twitter, Facebook, and other social media outlets. So when people say, I can't get another Botox patient to come into my clinic using my social media sites, it's not so much, it's not so much the tool, it's just the way in which you're using it. So that's really what you need to think about. And just to really illustrate this idea of how absurd likes are as a metric of success on, say, a social media site, likes don't pay your bills. I bank at Wells Fargo. And I can't go up to Wells Fargo with a wheelbarrow full of my Facebook likes and deposit it to pay my bills. This is an absolutely absurd graphic, but this is where, just for some reason, people use this as a metric of success. You need to be able to measure things that are actually revenue generating, actually beneficial to your business. Common sense says that success on social media means more business. And that's ultimately what you want to measure. And success in social media, quite simply, you need to be measuring things like the phone calls that come through your social media outlets. That is a great measure of success, not likes. Now, there's a difference between, we talked a little bit, and Dr. Weibel talked a little bit about websites, and that was brought up yesterday. Advertising and SEO. So things like websites would fall into that. Billboards, search engine optimization. Is very, very different from social and interactive media, and it's because of this. There are 3 ways to build your practice. Recruit more people to come into your practice, convert them over to new products and procedures, and retain them. Get them coming back to see you more often. Those are the only 3 ways that you're ever going to build your practice. Now, advertising and SEO does a great job at recruiting people. You have to get the word out there that you're there to get people coming in your door, and it does that very, very well. In terms of converting patients over to another procedure, it's not necessarily what advertising and SEO does. There's less expensive ways to do that, and it really doesn't do anything to retain patients. It's also transient. So when that radio ad airs, that TV ad airs, or that publication runs your print ad, it's gone. And that's it. The money is spent. So it's transient in its nature. Now, social media is quite different in the fact that it's able to attack all of the 3 ways to build your practice. It does recruit patients through this idea of social proof and referrals. It's one of the best conversion tools that we've ever seen. You have a captive audience, and you're able to let them know about your new laser, some things that you learned at the Aesthetic Extender Symposium. You're able to retain them. It's a way by which you can generate that personal connection that I started this talk with by sharing different things, but retaining people so they come to you and don't go to Dr. Groupon and his latest Botox special down the street. And it's permanent. As you build this community, this social media community, this network becomes a permanent asset for your business. So it's very, very powerful in that. So in a nutshell, advertising and SEO is something that you need because that's about getting new patients, but social and interactive marketing is about keeping those patients coming to you. It's relationship marketing. That's why you do this. So it's all about driving lifetime value of the patient relationship through brand stickiness. Again, so they're not going to the people down the street. They're coming back to you. It makes you more likable in their eyes. You're a more value-added partner. It's about driving lifetime value. Now, why do many offices get it wrong? Well, because they're not looking at the right metrics, number one, but they're also not remembering, they're really thinking about the mindset of the social media user. A lot of you, I'm sure, are social media users yourself. How many have a personal, say, Facebook account, for example? Yeah, I mean, a lot of you do. I mean, we're all familiar. When you go on your Facebook account, for example, this is what you're doing. You're seeing things like this. You're seeing vacation shots. You're seeing nice pictures. You're wishing people happy birthday. I mean, these are just the things that we do. You're catching up with friends and family when you're on social media. That's what your patients are doing. It's really important to understand this. Your patients are in the mindset of just catching up with friends and family, and they don't want to be bombarded with advertisements in the midst of this. Think about yourself. You're not in that mindset. Many aesthetic office practices look like this. You go to their pages, and it's just they're buy, buy, buy. I mean, you're like an infomercial, and this just doesn't resonate with what the social media users are doing at that time. So there's a rule out there, it's called the social 80-20, that says for every promotional piece of information you put out on social media, you have at least 4 pieces of information that are non-promotional, that have no strings attached, ask nothing of the audience, just give. And this keeps you from becoming a used car salesman. And it's not just us that's saying this, and we talk about this in our book, but you know, look at Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift. These are the people that make millions of dollars through their social media networks. And the way they do this is by connecting. This idea of personal connection that I talked about at the outset of this talk is that they put out hundreds of messages that have absolutely nothing to do with their newest project, their latest album, anything that they're working on. They put out things just to connect with people so that when they do put out that one promotional message, it hits and it hits big. And there are some promotional frequency standards. There are filters. So for example, if people wonder, well, I put a message out on my Facebook page, I got 500 followers and just nothing happened. Well, because the reality is there's a lot of filters built into these different social networks you need to be mindful of. For example, on a Facebook page, the average rate at which people will see your post is only 11%, meaning only 11 out of 100 of your followers will see that on average. So you need to put it out multiple times to get your audience to see it. So a good promotional frequency standard for Facebook is 5 to 7 times to make sure that your audience is seeing it. Google Plus is a different network with some different filters in place, but 2 to 3 times. And then Twitter, 10 to 25 times. And the reason is you have tons of noise. Twitter doesn't have filters, but you're competing with every message that's getting through to that particular follower in their news stream. And there are new algorithms that will repost stories that were of interest. For example, Facebook just came out with a new algorithm. Nonetheless, you need copy. You need lots of copy. And people in your office can do this. If you have someone who's a very skilled writer, you're going to want them to create lots and lots of great copy to promote your particular services. So some topics that might be of interest to your audience that are tied in with medical aesthetics that aren't necessarily promotional might be fashion, fitness, diet, travel, celebrity news, things that your audience is into. Share these things. This adds personality to your brand, and it cues them up and it sets them up for the promotional messages that you're going to send out later. If those of you work for a dermatology practice, we helped the ASDS put together a social media guidebook in which you can see visual examples of a lot of these. So you can ask your dermatologist, medical director, to take a look at that. It's all about speaking the language too. So on Facebook, the language is this. You're asking them to share or like. On Google Plus, you're asking them to +1 or to comment. And on Twitter, you want them to obviously retweet, or I'll certainly use the hashtags so that they can find your posts through the search tool on Twitter. It's all about smart selling and being interesting. Be interesting. So the 20%, the promotion. So after you've put out these great posts that are non-promotional in nature, it's all about actually getting the promotional message out there. So an effective cross-platform promotion might look like this. Here's an example on Facebook. There's a nice image that, because we know that posts with images on Facebook get through that filter a little bit more. You got a couple of different things. You got a tracking phone number, so you can track the number of phone calls that these promotions generate. A tracking link to an online appointment request tool, so you can track that as well with some information about the promotion. Now on Twitter, that exact same promotion you need to run that post again 10 to 25 times. But you can't run the same post because Twitter will filter that out and consider that spam. So you have to translate that to Twitter speak and do it in under 140 characters and run that a number of different times as well. And on Google Plus, the same rules generally as Facebook apply with different calls to action. But it's all about 5 to 7 variations, 15 to 25, and 2 to 3. It's about frequency, it's about variation, and it's about translation. That's ultimately what you need to think about when you're running these promotions on your social media. So a great way to do this, to measure the value that you're getting, is to measure and record the phone calls that you get coming in. Use that tracking number to measure the number of phone calls that you got and record those calls so that you can have those discussions with your staff members that might not be credentialing your practice the way that you'd like them to do. And you can use that same tracking phone number on all of your different social media activities. Now, transitioning away from social media, something else I just do want to touch on before closing is newsletters and interactive marketing. How many of you use newsletters in your practice to communicate with your patients? So yeah, a good number of you. And this is a great low-cost way. This is something that you can do very inexpensively with something through Constant Contact is one example of a great tool. But social and interactive marketing leads, it's something you need to complement with newsletters. Now, typical newsletters are jammed full of specials, don't necessarily cater to the mobile crowd. Most of you, I'm sure, interact with your emails through your mobile devices, and so that might be this one big image. How many of you have gotten an email from a business, and it's this big JPEG, and you kind of got to zoom in on the thing to even read it? That's not very mobile friendly, and you need to be very conscious of the fact that about 40%, based on the national statistics, of your audience are reading your newsletters through their mobile devices. So you need to make sure that you have ROI metrics as well. So here's a case study of newsletter optimization. We were working with a facial plastic surgeon's med spa. They had an email database at the time of just over 1,600 patients. And they had a measured ROI, a goal of a 400% ROI on this newsletter. So we had to measure, first of all, what was their value of a phone call. Phone calls were going to be the measurement that we are going to use to measure our success. We wanted to make sure we knew what was the value. They had an average patient ticket of $388. Their gross margin, so this was their average value minus the cost of product, was 60%. And their phone call conversion rate, every time the phone rang, 87% of the time, patients came in for a consultation or for a treatment. So you add all that together and you get their value of a phone call. Every time the phone rang, it meant $203 to this practice. So they invested $950 into this newsletter. Their target revenue, again on a 400% ROI, was $3,800, and we were measuring their phone calls and the appointment requests that they got out of this newsletter. So we'll walk through, this is the actual newsletter that we use with this practice, and the elements of a winning newsletter. A couple things. First of all, it's mobile friendly, and there's a little place at the top of these newsletters that is your email preview text, and this is something that you can use as a call to action to get people to open up and click that email on their mobile devices, and that's that one line of text that you see on your iPhone or your Androids. So this says puckering up next month's specials. Social media links and calls to action. Click to call, which is something, think about when you're using your mobile device and you're scrolling through an email. It's really convenient when you see that phone number and it's underlined in blue and you can just click it and call directly. Those are the things that you want to do with your newsletter so people can instantly do what you want them to do. An appointment request tool, and we were able to track this for them as well, an online shopping link. What's in it for them? So this isn't all about asking, it's about giving. It's about relationship building, it's about showing your expertise and educating your patients a bit. Images and videos were embedded, and the time of day in which you send this was a practice too, that they always wanted to send this newsletter on the first of the month at 8 a.m. Now there was a problem. There are some months in which, let's say, the first is on a Saturday. So now sending it Saturday at 8 a.m., that means that people aren't able to act on what's in the email for about 2 more days. So think about that. How often do you go back 2 days into your email queue and act on something? It just doesn't happen. So you need to think about the time in which you send these out, because the phone starts ringing right away. Tuesday through Thursday, 1 to 3 p.m. is the best, or 7 to 8 p.m. after your target audience has kind of put the kids down, they've had dinner, and they're catching up on things. These are the best times statistically to get people to open up emails and act on it. Typically, we'll recommend Tuesday through Thursday, though, because your office is open, your staff is there, and can set the appointments. And also ask for reviews. So some of the metrics that we got out of this, we had 27 phone calls, which resulted in a little under $5,500 in revenue, and 68 appointment clicks, assuming that about 50% of them actually followed through. That was $6,900, a total ROI of over 1,300%. Now, these are metrics that you can put in place in your office as well. Just be measuring the right things. Don't be measuring the open rates. Don't be measuring the clicks and the likes and the followers and all these things that just don't matter. Measure things that matter. And for this particular practice, the phone began ringing in 5 minutes. So again, you want to send these things out when your staff is there. So in closing the presentation overall on social and interactive media marketing, vanity metrics such as likes and followers, these are your enemies. These are the things that just don't matter to your business. Focus on things that actually drive revenue. And to do that, you need, I've got an image here of the most interesting man in the world. Deliver value and be interesting. Don't be someone who's pitching all the time. Deliver some value from time to time and do it frequently so that your audience finds you interesting. And insist on revenue generating metrics, things that actually drive your practice. So again, if you'd like an e-copy of our book, you can send me an email, and my email is right there. And thanks again.